Everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
It's kind of a good choice for a song, though, really, because mold is black, and we deal with color black on painting, and, you know, just kind of some good variety in all of that. You're listening to Key Pacific Strata Life on CIL 650. I'm Tony Giventi, your host, and I've managed to keep around Caleb and Dave and Dan, and we're going to actually deal with some emails that are really pertinent, actually, to also some of the restoration and the painting issues that have been going on. So here's one of the emails that we had from Gary Smith back in June 2nd. Owners in their building, they've had a number of small floods and things, and the strata, as opposed to filing insurance claims, have telling owners that you have to do your own repairs. And this is now, of course, they're finding out even a week later, this is a bad idea because other than mopping up the water, people aren't dealing with the problems. So, you know, what happens to the water? Caleb, maybe, you know, when the water is sitting in the walls and nobody's done the restoration, what happens to it?
Well, potentially, the longer it sits, the worse it gets. Eventually, after 72 hours, you have potential for mold to grow in the drywall, especially the paper back into the drywall. It's a great food source for mold. At that point, you may have an insulated wall. The insulation is sat wet, so now it's got the perfect environment. It's got water at its disposal. It's a perfect environment for temperature, for the humidity's just right, and it has a food source. So it's going to continue. At that time, in a wood-framed home or a building, they can have dry rot over time. So then there's more problems at that point, and eventually it's going to deteriorate.
So, but even in high-rise buildings, you know, we have drywall and wall separating units where the wall will sit with water filled in it, and there may be insulation providing soundproofing between those walls, and they may be wood, they may be steel studs, there may be a variety of components there.
Steel stud will rust out, exactly.
Right, and so over the long term, of course, we deal with a building issue, but we also deal with health issues for people in the units at the same time.
Very definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You also have wiring in those walls. I mean, there's the potential of fire hazard as well, because you're going to get corrosion of boxes, and it's really a very perilous thing to wander into. The restoration world works on something called the SR 500,
right.
S500,
That's right.
and the S500 tells us exactly what needs to be done. If it's wet, we need to do this and that to it. So leaving it is not in the S500 at all.
Yeah, I just don't see where anybody benefits out of not filing a claim or getting a company in to do the repairs and the restoration properly.
There's future headaches.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, and the other problems that you have is in many of the buildings that we have, high-rise and mid-rise, these are premium residences that somebody's paid 500, 800, 1.2 million for. They have hard surface floors, laminate floors, all types of finishing that are premium finishes that in a short period of time become damaged as a result of leaving this, right? And there's no longer an insurable claim for them because now it's not a loss. This was now a neglect or a maintenance issue to deal with these things.
Well, a lot of times, if we can get in there soon enough to, say, a hardwood floor, and it starts to cup, we can actually dry that back down to its original state. But the longer they leave it, the more likely it's just going to, an engineered floor will separate, and it's toast after that. It's no good.
So, message, take control. Strata needs to take control, make sure that regardless of where the damage occurred and what the value was, they need to make sure they have some sense that the restoration was done properly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Each of those walls or floors adjoins to somebody else.
That's the whole essence of strata living, right? Dan, here's a good one for you because this is another building that has sent us in an email. They have a problem where for the past 10 years, the strata has basically said to owners, you're responsible for your own windows. People have been changing their own windows. And now, of course, they have a number of problems because windows haven't fit properly. There are issues with the siding. There's now damage to the building. So how frequently do you come across that with buildings?
Well, we do come across it more often with them changing out, say, sealed units within the windows. But once they start dealing with the whole window assembly, you really open up an engineering question, right? What's the building been designed to do? And is the new window contractor or maybe the guy's brother who's putting in his window to save a few bucks, is he doing the work to what specification it should be done to, right? Is he applying the right flashings in the right places? And building standards have actually changed and improved over the last little while. And so what we've seen is that there's a larger requirement for shedding water from windows, right? There's more flashings in place. There's more sealants in place. There's more places where in the window cavity before you close it back up that you're creating essentially an area that the water will shed away from the interior of the building, so that you're not causing the same kind of issues we were just talking about with water within a place from water damage. Well, this is a great opportunity for water damage to begin to occur if it hasn't been done well.
Well, and we certainly see the implications of damage and failure and rot and mold growing and destruction of the building structure from exactly the same water penetration issues. Water is kind of a big thing for buildings.
It can be, and even the caulking components. People will go and they'll caulk around windows, maybe use the wrong materials, or not caulk them on the wrong places, not allow weep holes or those kind of things. Unless you're a skilled person and understand building envelope, you actually don't know what you don't know. And you can end up putting a window in, and it looks fine, right? But it isn't the 2 months or the 6 months, as you say. These buildings, either the unit gets resold, or the exterior of the building is really the corporation's responsibility, isn't it?
It is, and I was going to say a guy on a ladder who's a volunteer with a caulking gun in his hand on a building, strata building, always makes me shudder.
That's a scary thought.
There are work safe issues, there are all kinds of building issues, there's the finishing and the product and the knowledge, even caulking compatibility. Sealants are not compatible after the UV is affected over a long period of time, and in order for them to be effective, they have to be removed and replaced with proper sealants. Ongoing problem. One more email from Mary, and this deals with pipes and bathroom walls. Again, old building, so who's responsible to replace the pipes in my bathroom wall? Our building has been experiencing pinhole leaks, and council's advised owners that they each have to replace their own pipes. Well, we know what the impact is of aging buildings and not replacing plumbing systems. Inevitably, they're going to have significant water claims. And probably they're older buildings, they're probably not going to have shutoffs that are accessible for the unit either, unless they've been doing zone by zone upgrades and now have introduced the shutoffs. So from the legislative perspective, and I think this goes to windows as well on exteriors of buildings, generally windows on exteriors of buildings and building exteriors are common property. So they're the responsibility of the strata corporation. The same thing with pipes. Any pipes that are within a wall or a boundary between a strata lot and another strata lot, or a strata lot and common property, are deemed by the legislation to be common property. And stratas can't make people responsible for common property. So, it takes a lot of detective work to figure out, though. With Mary's case, we'd have to look at the strata plan, we'd have to figure out whether these pipes are in a common area, whether these pipes are interconnected with another strata lot in some way, whether they're part of the building plumbing system. But overall, collectively, kind of getting the essence of this show that, making owners do things that everybody's collectively liable for just seems like a bad idea.
I agree. And that's the thing. A lot of times with a lot of buildings, they have their own plumber that works on the building, so they will look after the piping themselves. But not just that, but in the older buildings, they'll start to repair a damage. There's asbestos possibly in that drywall mud. There's also lead in the paint possibly. So all these testings have to happen. So it's not just a matter of fixing that one pipe. There's so much more that encompasses that as well.
So the environmental conditions that would apply at the same time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just come up in the last 10 years where this has been an issue that we have to test for each and every time.
Well, and we do see that on older buildings now, especially where we have popcorn ceilings on buildings that are still there from pre-1985, where there is asbestos contained, which is, on appearance is fine as long as it's inert, but as soon as you have water damage and removal and restoration, then the conditions change dramatically, don't they?
Absolutely.
Dan, we didn't talk about brick. We don't have a lot of brick buildings in British Columbia, partly
Getting
because
a few more,
but partly because we didn't really have that as a resource, as a building material and a building supply for the most part. But treatment of brick or masonry type surfaces, are there treatments that the painting process that you guys can actually undertake to protect them?
Yeah, and we're seeing, as you say, a little more brick in the industry. What we're doing now much more is beginning to seal and protect brick. And so you've got you have some components in brick that are often unseen. You've got a lot of lintels, the metal kind of framing that holds brick in place that needs to stay. It's part of actually the structure of keeping the brick well preserved, and so it needs to be coated and not rusting through and those kind of things. So it does need to be treated. The second component, though, is actually the brick face and the mortar, and there's a number of really good water repellents that are being used now, and so we'll clean a brick surface like that, and then we'll flood that surface with a penetrating sealer. Doesn't change the appearance or the look. It doesn't create a shiny brick surface, for instance. But what it does is it prevents water from being able to get in. It slows down the process of the aging of the brick. And if you do get into a freeze and thaw cycle, it'll prevent some of the cracking and some of the distance from that happening as well.
Caleb, best tip you can give to consumers for Stratus?
First of all, they need to know, well, first of all, have insurance. Have insurance, absolutely. Second is find your water shut off if you know it's in your unit. That's a big thing too, so you can turn it off and quickly mitigate that loss.
Dave?
Sorry, those were the
same tips.
The insurance one is so important. I think people don't appreciate the importance of contents coverage for one thing. We have lots of instances where we're in to do work in a unit and someone's contents are in the way and they don't have insurance to pay anybody to move it. So they're either doing it themselves or it's not being done.
Well, and I've been to the CanStore warehouse where you're actually doing restoration on furniture. So things like Chesterfields and beds and stuff like that, they actually can be restored. And they may be of significant value. But if you don't have homeowner insurance, the only resource you have is to pay for it out of your own pocket.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's not inexpensive for sure.
Yeah. Dan, we're planning our painting job. What's the best tip you think you can provide for consumers?
Well, if you're planning it, you're already answering my first question, was be proactive, actually get ahead of the game. The second would be involve some experts. I would say you need a professional involved, and that might be a professional painting company, but oftentimes it actually requires you to look outside of that, maybe to the inspection agencies that are out there, maybe to the engineers that are out there, and if you're a little hesitant of that, talk to a professional painting company, and they can kind of guide you through that process too.
Well, thanks all three of you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. CanStar Restoration and Remdale Painting and Restoration. Certainly a pleasure to have you on the show. Look forward to seeing you again. My name's Tony Giavento. I'm the host of Key Pacific's Strata Life on CIL 650. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us questions to questions@strata.life. Questions@strata.life. We'll be right back.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call on CIL 650.